The Kremlin just said something that should have made global headlines today. They're waiting, not negotiating, waiting. And the reason why that's where this gets dangerous. Quick thing before we get into it. Drop the country you're watching from in the comments. I want to see where everyone's tuning in from today. I actually do read them. So there's a statement that came out of Moscow this morning, and I want to explain to you why it's a much bigger deal than the headlines are letting on. Dmitry Peskov, Kremlin spokesman. He said Russia is going to wait for new proposals from President Trump on ending the war in Ukraine. That's the headline. That's what everyone's running with. But here's what Peskov actually said, and this is where it gets really interesting. He acknowledged that the U.S. administration is sincere. Sincere. That's their word. They use that word about Trump. Now think about that for a second. Russia calling the American president sincere on peace talks while the bombs are still falling. There's a lot to unpack there, and most of it is not good. Let me walk you through what's actually happening. We've got a war that's been grinding on for years now. Thousands dead, cities flattened, global food prices all over the place. And everyone's been waiting for this moment, right? Trump promised he'd end it. He said it 100 times on the campaign trail. I'll end the war in 24 hours. I'll get Putin to the table. We all heard it. But here's the thing that nobody seems to be saying out loud. Russia is not asking for a new deal. They're not negotiating. They're not proposing terms. They're waiting. They're sitting back and they're watching. And that word, waiting, that's a power move. Let me explain what I mean. When someone says they're waiting for your proposals, they're putting the ball in your court. They're saying, you come to us. You figure this out. You make the offer. And if you make the wrong offer, they can just reject it, walk away, blame you. This is what Peskov said specifically. He said Russia had already accepted one settlement proposal from the U.S. earlier, a proposal that Ukraine rejected. And he blamed that rejection on, wait for it, European influence. He said Ukraine was influenced by the Europeans to say no. That's not just diplomatic talk. That's a signal. He's telling the world that Russia considers itself reasonable, that they're the ones who said yes, that Ukraine and Europe are the ones who said no. And now they're going to wait for the next offer. This is a classic Russian playbook move. You create a binary. You make yourself look patient. You make your opponent look stubborn. And then you just wait. Let time do the work. Now here's what almost every network is missing. Peskov also said something else, something that should terrify anyone paying attention. He said Russia will continue its military operations to achieve its objectives while they wait. He literally said that. So just to be crystal clear, Russia's position right now is, we're open to peace. We're sincere. We're waiting for your proposals. Oh, and also, we're going to keep bombing the absolute hell out of Ukraine until you figure out what to give us. That's not a peace offering. That's a shakedown. That's them saying, we're willing to talk, but we're also not stopping until we get what we want. And here's where the American angle gets really messy. Because Peskov also talked about what he called the dualism of the U.S. position. Let me translate that for you. He's pointing out that the United States is, on one hand, sending weapons to Ukraine, billions of dollars worth, tanks, artillery, air defense systems, and on the other hand, saying they want peace. Moscow sees that as weakness. They see it as confusion. They see it as an opening. And the thing is, they might be right. Think about it from the Russian perspective for a second. And I know that's uncomfortable. I don't like doing it either. But if you're in the Kremlin and you see the United States arming Ukraine and trying to negotiate a peace deal at the same time, what do you think? You think the U.S. is afraid. You think they don't really want to fight. You think they want out. And if you think they want out, you don't make concessions. You wait. You squeeze harder. You let the internal political pressure build. And that internal pressure is real. There are Americans right now, plenty of them, who are tired of sending money overseas, tired of watching the news from Ukraine. They want this over. Russia knows this. They've studied it. They have people whose whole job is to understand American public opinion. So here's the timeline we need to actually think through. We had a peace proposal. The U.S. put it forward. Russia said yes. Ukraine said no. Peskov said no because of European influence. Now, whether that's true or not, whether Ukraine genuinely didn't like the terms, or whether Europe actually pressured them, the outcome is the same. The deal died. And Russia got to claim the moral high ground. We accepted, they rejected. We're the reasonable ones. That's what the Kremlin wants the world to hear. And now they're waiting. They're saying to Washington, okay, you blew it last time. What's your new offer? And while you're thinking about it, we'll be advancing on the front lines. This isn't diplomacy. This is a countdown. There's a deeper problem here, too. The war in Ukraine isn't just about Ukraine anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. This is about Russia's relationship with Europe, about NATO expansion, about the post-Cold War order that America built. Putin has been clear for years. He doesn't accept the current arrangement. He thinks Russia was humiliated after the Soviet Union collapsed. He thinks the West took advantage. And right now, he's testing something. He's testing whether the United States still has the stomach for this. Because if Trump comes back with a proposal that gives Russia what they want, territorial concessions, neutrality for Ukraine, some kind of guarantee that NATO stops expanding, Putin will take it. But he won't stop. He'll just pause, rearm, wait for the next opening. That's the thing with authoritarian leaders. They don't operate on a timeline that's measured in news cycles. They think in decades. They think in generations. And Americans, we don't. We think in tweets, in headlines, in election cycles. There's a fundamental mismatch here, and Russia knows it. They're exploiting it. They've been exploiting it since this war began. So let's look at what happens next. President Trump is going to put forward some kind of proposal. It's going to have to be different from the last one, because the last one didn't work. And here's the question that I keep coming back to. What does a new proposal look like that both sides can accept? Because we already know Ukraine's position. They want their territory back. They want security guarantees. They want justice for war crimes. They want NATO membership eventually. And we know Russia's position. They want to keep what they've taken. They want Ukraine to stay out of NATO. They want sanctions lifted. Those positions they're not even close. They're planets apart. So any proposal that actually works is going to require one side to give up something major, something they've said they won't give up. Which side do you think that's going to be? That's a hard question. And I'm not trying to be cute here. I genuinely don't know the answer. But I'll tell you what I do know. Russia is comfortable right now. They've taken territory. Their economy is on a war footing. They've gotten used to the sanctions. They're producing more weapons than ever. They're recruiting more soldiers than ever. They're not in a hurry. They're not desperate. And they genuinely think they can outlast us. And the us in that sentence is a problem. Because it's not just the United States. It's the United States, Europe, Ukraine, all the allies, all the partners. And that coalition, it's fraying. Europe is tired. Inflation is high. Energy prices are a nightmare. There are elections coming up. Politicians are feeling the heat. The global South, India, Brazil, South Africa, China. They've mostly stayed neutral. They're not helping. They're sitting back, watching, buying cheap Russian oil, and waiting for the chaos to settle. So Russia's strategic bet is pretty clear. They think if they hold on long enough, the West will fracture. The United States will get distracted. Ukraine will run out of soldiers. And then they can dictate terms. That brings me back to Peskov's comments. Russia will continue its military operations to achieve its objectives. That's not a throwaway line. That's doctrine. They're telling us out loud in a press conference that they're not stopping. Not for a proposal, not for negotiations, not for anything short of total victory or total collapse. And we need to hear that. We need to really understand it, because a lot of people in the West have been talking about some kind of off-ramp, a way out, a deal that lets everyone save face. But if Russia's objective is, and I'm quoting here, achieving its objectives, and those objectives have been defined over and over again as taking Ukraine, demilitarizing it, and making it a Russian satellite state, well then there is no off-ramp, not one that we're willing to drive down. So what does the United States do? This is where the Trump factor gets real. And I'm going to try and talk about this without getting into the partisan stuff, because I don't think this is about party. I think this is about something bigger. Trump ran on ending wars. He said it constantly. I'll end the war in Ukraine. I'll stop the killing. Those were his exact words. And there's a lot of Americans who voted for him because of that. People who are tired of the bloodshed. People who feel like the money should be spent here at home. People who just want it to be over. I get that. I genuinely do. But here's the hard part that nobody wants to say out loud. Ending a war isn't always the same as winning it. You can end a war by surrendering. You can end a war by giving the other side what they want. You can end a war by walking away and letting the stronger side crush the weaker one. And that's the trap. If Trump comes back with a proposal that gives Russia what it wants, Ukraine loses territory. Ukraine's sovereignty is compromised. NATO's credibility is destroyed. And if he comes back with a proposal that Ukraine can accept, Russia will say no. They'll say it's not sincere. They'll blame the Europeans again. They'll keep fighting. There's no easy way out of this. And I think the Kremlin knows that. That's why they're waiting. They're waiting for the Americans to get frustrated. They're waiting for the Europeans to get tired. They're waiting for Ukraine to get exhausted. And in the meantime, the bombs keep falling. The cities keep getting shelled. The people keep dying. I was looking at the casualty figures this morning, and I don't want to just throw numbers at you. I know we get numb to numbers. But think about this. Every day this war goes on, Ukrainian kids are growing up in bomb shelters. Russian mothers are burying sons who were told they were going on a special military operation. The human cost is staggering. And the longer this waiting game goes on, the higher that cost climbs. So let me get back to Peskov. Let me get back to what he said, because I think there's one more layer to this that's really important. He said the U.S. position is dualistic. They're arming Ukraine and they're seeking peace. He said that like it was a contradiction, like it was a weakness. But here's what I want you to hear. It's not a contradiction. It's the only way to actually get peace. You don't get peace by disarming your ally. You get peace by making the aggressor pay too high a price to continue. That's what Ukraine is doing. They're fighting. They're taking casualties. They're inflicting casualties. They're making Russia bleed. And that's the thing that Putin can't sustain forever. Russia has a population problem. They have an economic problem. They have a morale problem. These are all real things. They're not unbeatable. They're not invincible. So the United States has a choice. Keep arming Ukraine. Keep the pressure on. Make the war so costly that Russia has to back down. Or start making concessions. Try to bribe Putin into stopping. Offer territory. Offer security guarantees. Offer sanctions relief. One path leads to a negotiated peace that might actually hold. The other path leads to what? A pause? A reset? A chance for Russia to rearm and come back later? That's the decision that's coming. And Peskov's comments today, they tell me that Russia is betting on option 2. They're betting that America will blink, that Trump will fold, that the dualism will resolve itself into capitulation. They might be right, but they might be wrong. And that's the tension. That's the thing we're all going to be watching over the next few weeks and months. Because what happens in Ukraine isn't just about Ukraine. It's about whether the international rules-based order still means anything. It's about whether nations can invade their neighbors and get away with it. It's about whether the United States still has the will to lead. Those are big questions. They feel abstract, but they're not. They're very real. They're being decided right now in meetings you'll never see, in phone calls that'll never be recorded. And the thing that bothers me, the thing that keeps me up at night, is that most Americans don't realize how close we are to a really bad outcome here. A really, really bad outcome. So I'll leave you with this because I think it's important. Russia is waiting. They're waiting for the next American proposal. They're not going to stop fighting while they wait. And they're planning to achieve their objectives. That's not a peace process. That's a countdown to a decision. A decision that President Trump is going to have to make. And that decision, it's not just about this war. It's about the next war and the one after that. Because whatever happens here, the world is watching. They're watching to see whether the United States still stands for something or whether we're just tired. I don't know what Trump's going to propose. I don't know what Russia will accept. I don't know what Ukraine can live with. But I know that waiting by itself is not a strategy. It's a surrender to time. And time always favors the side that's willing to suffer longer. And right now, Russia thinks that's them. Russia thinks they can endure more than we can. They might be right. They might be wrong. But either way, we're going to find out. Because that proposal is coming. And when it does, the whole world is going to know exactly where everyone stands. That's the situation. That's what happened today in Moscow. That's what Peskov said. That's what it means. And honestly, I wish I had better news for you. I wish I could tell you this was all going to work out, that diplomacy would win, that peace was around the corner. I can't tell you that. What I can tell you is that the fighting isn't going to stop. Not yet. Not while Russia still thinks it can win. Not while Ukraine still has the will to fight. And until something changes, until one side blinks, this whole thing just keeps grinding. So we watch, we wait, and we hope that when the next proposal comes, it's strong enough to hold. Because if it's not, if it collapses like the last one, I don't think we get another chance. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. I'm curious what you think about all this, honestly, because I've gone back and forth on it. The arming, the peace talks, the waiting, it's a lot. Drop a comment and tell me where you land. I actually read them, and it helps me figure out what to cover next. Stick around. There's going to be a lot more to talk about in the coming days, and you're going to want to hear it. I'll see you in the next one.